Good evening everybody and welcome to the studio this evening. Okay, so we have the lion, we have some shadow on the lion. Now we do some non-shadowed bits. I think what I'm going to do is just adjust this camera a little bit. So we'll just zoom out a little bit. Do it the easy way to start with. Sorry, just dealing with something else just for the moment. Okay, so we're going to do some of the lion's fur. And I'm actually kind of wondering just how I want to do this, but we shall see. I think what we'll probably do is start with effectively underpainting and see how we go from there. In this particular case, underpainting, if I was actually painting, would be large blocks of colour over which you put detail and more accurate colours. In this particular case, what I'm going to try and do is to put a level of pyrography down and then get see how it goes, see whether I need to go to using fur textures over the top or whether we work with it as it is. We shall see. Okay. Actually, ears. Yeah, let's do something with the ears to start with. First thing I want to do with the ears, I think, is to get rid of that pencil mark. So I'm going to start here by just creating a little bit of colour, which tells me where the pencil mark was, and then I can erase it. Like that. And now what I can do is apply colour where the pencil mark was, to just slightly further out from the marking that I had a moment ago. Now I do suspect in the ears at least I probably am going to need to do some fur texturing. Now the ears are silky smooth, certainly on the outside. A lot of fur around here, loose, so fairly rough. What I'm looking at is sort of lots of fine hair, not particularly laid in smoothly like the coat. They're just all over the place. But around the outside edge of the ears, really fine soft fur which is laid almost flat, really silky smooth. So I want to get a silky smooth texture. Fluffy Twiglet, good evening. Welcome to the studio this evening. Indeed it is. It's a growler. Which I happen to know is the nickname for a particular type of locomotive. And the difference is, I don't know which type of locomotive, but I know there's one got that gets nicknamed that. 3D Bloke, good evening, welcome. Maybe they've fixed something. Maybe it's Bob's influence. Hey, I was watching Twitch this afternoon and Bob had what was it, something like 30,000, close to 30,000 viewers, and the next nearest game was at about 24. Well, maybe not then. So I'm going to do some happy fur, and then I might do some happy shadows. At least I can claim to have mentioned Bob before he came on Twitch. Yeah, I think creative has been the top section now for a few days. I don't actually know what it is at the moment, but when I've looked. Yeah, then this wants to be quite dark. Well, I kind of want a nice colour more than it being quite dark. It'd be nice if I can get a sort of a gingery colour. So how you been doing, Free? Wow. The only problem, as somebody I think mentioned last night, is creative may now be the leading game in quotes, but Bob's got all the viewers. There's nobody left. Yeah. How's the turntable going, Free? Wasn't around on Friday, so, or Thursday for that matter, so I didn't get to see how it was going. Yeah, there is a lot of trolls. Had a couple last night that, well, quite frankly, even the quality of the trolls has gone down. Indeed, Fluffy Twiglet, and I am grateful for that as well. I can probably turn this up a little bit. Not too far, not too far. One of the challenging bits is that the early colours, when you're applying pyrography, the early colours are really sort of dirty colours. They almost look like you've literally got dirt on the wood. You don't get that golden, nice brown colour until it gets quite dark. And so sometimes it sort of doesn't necessarily, well, sometimes you want to cheat and actually make it darker than it should be, just so you get the nice colours. You're going to play some H1Z1. Well, you're playing it better than I'm playing it at the moment, because I ain't playing it. Well, the kitties are fine. How is Lady Zara? I think Lady Zara possibly has a cold. She's certainly got a little bit of a problem breathing at the moment. But the kitties are fine. There are two with us at the moment. Felix, who never sits on my knee, never wants to sit on my knee, currently is asleep on my desk. That's my work desk. So he's not going near me, but he's going where I was during the day, and Cleo is on Lady Zara's knee. And Junior will be outside playing somewhere, I suspect. Oh, you're going to try and... What, with acrylics? Oh, yeah, probably with acrylics. You're going to do a paint along at the same time, Free. That will be interesting to see. Let me know when you attempt to do that, because I would like to watch that. You know, I watched about 4 this afternoon or this evening episodes, and yeah, he's an expert, so he doesn't have to make it look easy. To the point where it's very easy to convince yourself that you could do exactly what he's doing, and I'm sure it possibly is true. I will find out one of these days, because I do have one of a Bob Ross kit. Lady Zara bought me quite some time ago. Unfortunately, just at the moment there is no space to get it out, otherwise I'd have a go. But that is going to happen in the future. No oils. Yeah, a lot of his stuff does almost depend on it being acrylic, doesn't it? I love the fact, in some ways, that he starts and 30 minutes later you've got what looks like a photograph. 30 minutes. And it's a 17 by 24 canvas. And it's 30 minutes. And that's the bit I can't get over. It's 30 minutes. And I tell you what, I saw the episodes today, Free, and that was on black canvas. And they look really good on black canvas. Not, he was obviously doing colour on black, but they did look really good. Something I've never tried airbrush wise. I've always gone for monochrome, white on black, but be an interesting thing. I'm sorry you're not feeling very well as well, Fluffy Twiglet. I hope both you and Lady Zara get better soon. You're avoiding a trip out, blimey. Captain Derby, good evening. Sorry, Free, I'm misreading your comment. You want to show everybody that it takes practice to struggle, even if you're an expert. Alder H, good evening and welcome. Yes, he was using his the magic white, or the magic white today, of course. It's an interesting thing that I'd never thought of trying. Mind you, airbrush wise, it wouldn't work the same, but. Oh, you've got to make the noises, Captain Derby. You've got to make the noises. I mean, obviously, Bob gave a lot of people the confidence to just try painting and to get reasonably decent results. But it was interesting this afternoon when I was watching it. It was kind of like the sort of videos I don't like, because he didn't really. He was almost saying, you want a waterfall like this. It was kind of like, I didn't quite get the sense of him explaining why you do something, as opposed to you just do it like this. And that kind of bothered me a little bit. How are you going to do the hair? With difficulty is the answer to that. I don't actually know, Alder H. I may do it sort of, well, I think I'm going to end up, to be honest, doing it with a hair texture, but what I'm going to try and do is use something like this sort of technique, probably with the heat turned up, and sort of what I would sort of almost term underpainting, but just do lots and lots and lots of overlays, so that you get an impression of there being lots of fur. So you're almost just doing highlights and lowlights, rather than trying to put individual strands of fur in. But I'm not sure how that's going to turn out. We're going to have to wait and see. Because I'm thinking here in the ear, I'm probably going to need to do fur textures. Actually, what? Let's try. Yeah. I'm just trying to do here is sort of not exactly use the very tip of this pen, but use sort of so I'm not trying to get the sharp edge, but I'm trying to use a small area of the tip to get lines. So I'm sort of trying to get, you know, I don't know, 2mm thick lines, if you like, rather than 1/10 of a millimeter thick lines. Stop that. Thank you. Must have a dry joint or something in that box. The power light keeps going on and off. It's not done that for a while. It was doing it a while ago and then stopped. Do I need this a little bit hotter maybe? Yeah, no, it's. I mean that the aim was to show people, you know, you can do a landscape, follow this, and apply variations to it, and you know, if you want to do a waterfall, this is how you approach the picture of a waterfall in a forest. So from that point of view, or you know, a snowy mountainside, it was fine. You know, and as you say, it builds confidence and interest, and makes people believe that they can do it, and of course they can. So that's yeah. Thinners, yes, extremely important. Although it's now in the ones I was showing, he was using odor-free thinners. Oh, the bit that ended up was amusing me a lot today was, of course, everything was happy. There was the happy canvas and the happy clouds and the happy waves and the happy trees and the happy grass. You disapprove. What of the colour, or what, everything happy, or my rendition of a tiger? Especially since it's a lion. I'm not sure whether that's working very well. I think cyan's my favourite colour at the moment. For some reason. I tend to like highly saturated colours. And primary. So red, blue or green, or cyan, magenta and yellow, whichever way you wish to take it. You're still having problems with the Mac, Free, or is this the real machine that you're having problems with? That's my phone on the floor again. That cat does not like my phone. Every time he gets on that desk, he knocks it off. It appears to be hastening its own demise. course, at this point in time, what I'm trying to do here is really create streaks. So you know what's going to happen, don't you? Is I'm going to get the most perfectly smooth texture you can imagine. I'm not going to get streaks, which I normally get when I'm trying to do a smooth texture. Yes, you can, LDLH, and that's probably what I'm going to do. I may do a little bit in here, but I think I'm going to make the background quite dark. And then what you've got is you've got whiskers here and fairly light sort of chin hairs or fur. So once I've made the background quite dark, what I'm going to do is scratch the hairs out and then possibly apply pyrography over the top to make them, to tint them so they're not pure white. But then they'll sort of go over the top of the background. And same if I sort of put some in here. I'd then tint them because I don't want the white, but they'd then be over the top of the black. Ah dear. I think I'm going to stay with OBS for a while at least. Guy Manuel, Guy Manuel. I hope I got that right. Thank you very much for following. That is most kind of you. And welcome to the studio. I'm essentially trying to do the pyrographic equivalent of the dagger stroke. Without the blob at the start. Yeah, it was probably somebody playing with one of the subscription versions the other night. I was watching something and they were playing with the transitions, and there's some really nice transitions in there, you know, sort of folds and fades and slides, and that looked, you know, from a professional point of view, that looked really quite good. You know, for video video outputs, especially if you want it to sort of record things, because that way then would save having to do post-production. Ow. Yeah, that would be nice. Mind you, I've got what do I run here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I run 5 scenes normally, or 6 if you include the BRB. And I generally do that on each of the collections, because I lay them out. Some things are laid out slightly differently depending on whether it's pyrography or jewellery or whatever. But even a fade between them would be nice rather than a straight switch like you get with OBS. And at the moment with OBS I have to time at least one of them almost spot on, otherwise I end up with the black screen for a while. This is not really, well, we'll see. This isn't really working. Yeah, although with having the 2 movies in there with the animated carving, otherwise I'd be running with too fewer. So sort of stream, start, broadcast, end. But with the intro and outro in there, there's a couple. So, but. I might just possibly have a play at some point with XSplit, but just at the moment, this is kind of working, and I don't really want to start at this moment in time playing about with it, because one of the things I half suspect is that I'd quite like it, and therefore I'd want one of the next versions, and I don't want to spend any money at the moment. So I'm kind of like avoiding trying things out. I don't know. As Fee was yeah, as Smire Age, as Fee was saying there, you know, things like transitions. OBS doesn't have them at the moment. It might do later, or it might do in their subscription version, because that looks to be what they are planning to do, is to have a subscription version. But you know, just because it's open source doesn't necessarily mean it's the best, and it's somewhat, you know, what they call horses for courses. It's if it meets your requirements, then it meets your requirements. I kind of find I've done a lot of video editing, and I'm kind of used to transitions, and not having a smooth transition between scenes is a little bit off-putting. So, you know, I don't know what I'm running at on mine with. So look, so I'm running 2 cameras on here. Yeah, I'm running. Well, this is running about 40% CPU at the moment. Mind you, well, I'm going to say, mind you, it's only a 2.7 gigs. I haven't got it upclocked or anything, but 40% across 8 cores, well, 4 cores and 8 threads is quite a lot. What actually is it? OBS that's running that much? Yeah, OBS is taking 20% of the processor fairly consistently. So it's almost hogging a complete core. I mean, at this stage, I'm not doing anything else with it, so it's not so bad. But but running with 2 cameras, I have not been particularly seeing anything. The only problem I've had with 2 cameras is the same one, you know, 3 that you had initially, and that is getting them on 2 separate USB hosts. And once I twigged as to what the problem was, then I sort of didn't particularly have 2 problems. Yeah, it's kind of, well, it's not. I was going to say it's kind of odd. You kind of almost expect, you know, it's audio. It's a stream of audio in the machine. Why won't you read it? You know, it's kind of something particularly irritating, isn't it? You know, you can hear it. You can hear it on your headphones. You can hear it on the TV. You know, it's going down the HDMI. Why won't you read it? Mind you, having said which, of course, you were feeding audio down the HDMI, and if I remember rightly, there's at least 2 different ways of feeding audio, because it's packetized, so there's different protocols. So it might have been something like that, but I don't think we'll we'll get any of this low down in the thing 3D. I've got to be somewhere near the bottom. I'm not sure what I'm doing here is actually working that well. Oh bother! And then I go and do that. I wonder if I ought to just revert to doing it as a texture. That might be a better idea, I think. Because this is there where I now start to get hot fingers. Am I safe for work? I don't know about that question as to whether I'm safe for work or not. Well, according to their blog, it's supposed to be. It is supposed to be a mix of partnered, non-partnered, large and small. So I think they're what they've got sort of. They seem to have two. I've not really looked at it, but they seem to. When I was reading their sort of, was it the blog or something? The suggestion seems to be that they've got in mind a particular style of broadcasting for what they want to put on there, as opposed to, not necessarily taking things at random, but. I think what they've got in mind a creative streamer. The creative streamer that they want to see, and they're going to sort of feature them on the roll. Oh well, that's usually about 15 more than me then, 3D. This is going to be too hot. Let's turn that down. Well, I think Adobe, as far as I understand, is I think in some ways Adobe is sponsoring all of this. So I'm kind of wondering whether I say sponsored, whether they've paid for it and they're the ones that are actually driving driving Twitch to actually do this, because you get things like Cobble with Painter, who've got quite a large community. Adobe really didn't have that, and I'm kind of thinking that they're looking at this as a way of doing their community as well. Well, if they do, it'll be nice. I mean, sort of. I've not been. I didn't go onto Twitch expecting them to do any of that. Anything like that to sort of suddenly leap up and be top of the charts or anything like that. It's always expected it to be a long process to sort of build up any sort of large audience, and I'm still not that sure whether that's something I ideally want, but because the danger with obviously with the large audiences is that you lose that. I don't know quite how to describe it, but it's sort of okay. I'm broadcasting. Ideally, I'm teaching a little bit of what I've learned, and maybe learn as much again from you guys that are watching. But it's also sort of just a nice evening to sort of have I'll say a chat, and it's kind of one-sided because you're typing and I'm talking, but kind of nice to have sort of that whilst I'm doing art like this to sort of talk and chat. And I'm not quite sure when if you get thousands, whether it's going to be really hard to maintain that same sort of thing. Because there's I mean, even when you get some of the people that have sort of tried to maintain sort of communities like Squirrel, for example, when you watch his broadcast, it, largely speaking, he's half ignoring the chat, and there's just so much flying by that you can't expect him to, but it sort of just seems a pity in a way. So it's kind of weird. You almost want the best of both, and I'm not sure what the best of both is. Now this pen's too cold. I've got a trade-off on here. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I still sort of wonder just what it would be like, if you like, to be able to do this this sort of thing, as a not as a full-time job, but as well, full-time, for it to actually pay, to be a career, if you like, to be sustainable on its own, rather than actually having to go out to work and things. Um, and you know, I am sort of fully aware, if you like, that you know, doing a hobby as a job is not the same thing as doing a hobby, and it becomes a different dynamic. But sort of, oh, it makes you wonder. Yeah. Oh, I mean, if the chat was sort of, some of the chats are just all over the place, but when you get the chats that are sort of discussing a single subject almost, or you know, they're actively participating as opposed to some of the chats, that's kind of a different thing as well. But yeah, well, certainly I try and avoid being silent, but sometimes it's just, you know what. I just want to art. I don't want to talk sometimes. Or yeah, if chat isn't particularly active, then I mean some of the stuff I do, I can talk about. You know, like when I'm carving and a little bit when I'm doing pyrography here. But some of the stuff when I'm doing it is just so really hard to talk about. That it sometimes it's hard to avoid having a really quiet stream. I must admit, there's one reason why there's background music playing now. It does give me a chance to shut up occasionally. You wouldn't think I was a shy person, would you? I'm not sure this is actually working very well, what I'm doing here. It may be that I just got to do more of it. Ow. Now what the music doesn't do that. What of course what's difficult is while I'm doing this and I've got my eye, because you can see I'm looking down, the chat's sorry about that, the chat's in front of me on the monitor straight in front of me, and especially if it's quiet and I've got my when you like you are now, it's a relatively active chat. I can see the monitor jump out the top of my eyes, but if it's relatively quiet, I don't see it move, and then it can be sort of 5 minutes before I notice somebody said something, which is kind of embarrassing in a way. But yeah, I do that for I actually probably mostly lurk. I'm not a particularly active chatter. Well, potentially, you know, I quite often spend a lot of time in your streams and I never say a word. And it's in some ways it's kind of I don't know, a little bit hypocritical in a way, because I don't want people to do that in my streams, but yet I'll go do it in other people's streams, and it's okay. Oh, you're starting early, aren't you, Free, these days? Okay, well, have a good stream, Free, and see you again later. And anybody who's watching that isn't familiar with Free, we do recommend you check him out. Preferably after watching the end of my stream, but if you want to go now, that's up to you. And Free this evening is streaming games, H1Z1. But he often does painting. He's normally an airbrush artist, but he's having a real brush period at the moment, including things like that, with acrylic and oils. So check him out. Although, as he did mention earlier, he's not necessarily safe for work, depending on your work's view of certain topics. Yeah, but in which stream, Free? Well, at least it's fair that way. That's showing up. Yeah, not very fantastically well. Certainly, I was just looking at that on camera. This area here, I'm doing quite. I'm doing the same fur technique that I was using there. Up here, originally I tried it using a more flat shader technique, and it wasn't really working for me. And I started doing fur over the top. I'm still actually not that sure it's working very well in looking like fur. I was looking at it on just then on the camera because, as I've mentioned before, the camera gives me a different perspective. It's sort of looking a little bit like fur here, long fur, for the mane, but I'm not fantastically happy with the result I'm getting. But I at this stage, I've got really no choice. I just carry on and see how it turns out. And it could just be that, and this is kind of the same with when I've done this sort of thing, airbrushing. When you first lay it down, your first layer or two layers don't look much, and you've got to sort of keep building up the layers before you get the sort of texture that you're after. Multi-stream lurking. Yeah. I quite often do that as well, Captain Derby, either 2 or 3 running. But I tend to only have sound on one though. Depending on what background. Ironically enough, if somebody's playing music and it's not the stream I'm got active sound on, then I will mute it. Because of course that just means I can't hear somebody else speaking on another channel, but it's kind of weird, isn't it? I tend not to watch channels that don't have sound, but when they do have sound I tend to mute it when I'm running more than one at once anyway. Well, there does seem to have been some interesting more interesting channels on just recently. I was watching, actually last night I was watching somebody throwing clay pots on a potter's wheel. And what was I watching? Watching somebody else do something original, shall we say, the other night. So I think there does certainly seem to be starting to be a few more interesting crafts on there, arts, crafts, however you want to describe it. Actually, I've got a feeling I saw somebody else doing some glass work as well. Yeah, oh, really loud music usually, Captain Derby. I do have the advantage though, LDLH, of having 3 monitors, so I can, if I want to, I can sort of put 3 full screen on. Within my long time ago, I used to work in an area where they did in television broadcasting, basically in switching, and one of the things you got used to doing there was watching multiple monitors at the same time, because you were monitoring them for events, things going wrong and stuff like that. So I kind of got used to watching to seeing more than one thing at once. Technically you can't watch more than one at once, but you kind of know, you can sort of, your attention is drawn to interesting things going on, shall we say. So if somebody was just sat here like I'm doing now, talking, but we're not doing anything, my attention would wander onto something else. But and I still seem to have retained that ability, shall we say, to monitor multiple streams. Problem is finding who owns the voice if you're new in the stream. Yeah, it depends if you've seen the face. I mean, if you've seen the face, you just lip sync it. So if they're off camera, then yeah. A quick mute though. Soon lets you know who it is. I can't watch more than about 3 at once though. That just does get too silly, mind you. I don't actually know how many streams I could watch at once. Off the top of my head, I don't know what my downstream bandwidth is. I know I can easily watch 3 HD streams. That's for free, probably going live. But knowing free, I wouldn't I wouldn't chance that he was joking earlier when he said about the banning. I guess it's sort of working a little bit, is this? And again, the stream is seeing a slightly darker version of what I'm looking at. It's sort of working, I guess, with the first, the long. I've got to try and make sure I get really long strokes in there. But the other difficulty with trying to get long fur in is that I guess what I've got to do is move the pen fairly slowly to give it a chance to heat up again. I'm purposely moving quite fast here because I want more or less a texture without much colour. It's kind of like a highlight area. Now there is a little bit of colour and it will catch just slightly the light, so I do want a little bit of texture in there. So by moving fast I get a little bit of the a little tiny bit of colour, and there's just enough heat to actually sort of mark the wood in terms of it physically pushing the fibres a little bit, so I get like a scratch almost. So I'm getting some colouring there. But as I said before, the problem with doing this texture is I've got to hold the pen vertically, and the heat then comes straight up onto my fingers, and it's like putting your hand or finger over a candle flame. It gets hot quickly. This is going to be quite a long process, is this? So it's hot. Normally the pen itself doesn't get hot. I mean, it's quite comfortable to hold. The connector does a little bit, and the way in which this pen is designed, it's designed sort of hollow, and there's air vents here and at the top, as well as sort of slight holes in the bottom. And what these does tend to do is to draw heat up inside the body and exhaust it through the vents, especially at the top. So heat that's sort of coming from the wires is cooled off, because heat, although it's generated at the tip, is travelling up the wires. The wires themselves wouldn't get hot if the tip wasn't. So it's being conducted up those, and there's a very slight cooling draft which goes up the body of the pen, which also keeps the body relatively cool. But of course, to put your finger right over the top like that, which is exactly over the top like you would do a flame, it gets hot after a little while. And when I'm holding it this way, that's precisely what's happening. My fingers are getting a little too hot to be comfortable. I'm not getting burned, but it is just sort of too hot to be comfortable. Okay, I'm trying to some, maybe let's just and now I've put some texture. Let's just see if I can do some flat shading over the top. Not fantastically finding a method I'm happy with doing this. That might be worth trying. I've just got out. What I've got is I have another. What's in there? That's empty. I've got another pen here, which is actually a knife blade. It's not knife sharp, but it's sort of knife-like. And if I was cutting something like, if I had something like Milo and I was cutting like a stencil, that is the tool I'd use to do it. Let's see. Let's have an experiment. Let's see what, because I've not actually found a really excellent use for this particular tool before. Let's see what it's like when this is it's subtly different actually to the to using the edge of the other tool. It's slightly wider and the heat is concentrated differently. I'm not quite sure yet how the heat is being generated on this tool. With the with my wider shader, for example, as I've mentioned before, the heat is actually generated. It's not a smooth generation of heat across the whole width of it. It's more on one side than the other. And you learn sort of how to handle that. I think I've got to learn how to use this particular tool. Whoa! I've never seen that before. What I actually got then was a flash of light. Obviously a little splinter of wood actually just flashed. Must have been a little tiny dust particle. It was hot enough to actually combust. Now I know the shader itself can't get, the other shader can't get hot enough to actually do that. Obviously this can. Yeah, that's right, Alder LH. I'm sort of trying to figure it out as I go along, trying to find a method that sort of seems to work. I'm not sure. actually what I've just started doing is holding this more so that I run over the surface rather than cutting into it. And I'm getting a slightly different style of marking. Which is starting to look a bit interesting. So this is kind of, at the moment, working rather like having a really fine pencil and just making lots of marks on something fairly soft. Now it is cutting into the wood, so I'm not avoiding that altogether. And I'm not sure that as a texture is working fantastically well. Obviously long hair is a technique I'm going to have to learn. And I haven't developed a technique of my own that seems to work really well for this, so I wonder. Ow! Now that is quite warm. Let's turn that down and swap it out. I'll try swapping it out for this pencil tip. Let's turn that temperature way down. Let's see if I can actually do this maybe pencil style. Okay, need a little bit more heat, I think. Now what I'm hoping here is that this is a rounded sort of tip. So I'm kind of hoping that instead of cutting into the wood, I know it's still going to deform the wood, but instead of cutting into it, it's going to create like a slight valley. But the main thing is I can run over it with the tool a lot easier. With the sharp edge tools, when you're trying to go when you get near to a mark, it sort of slips in, which sort of makes it a bit difficult to put two or more marks, close to each other. So I'm going to experiment with this for a little while, and it may well be also I'm going to have to just work out what's the best temperature to operate this pen at for doing this. I really am trying to sort of layer colour over the top of each other. That's kind of what I'm hoping that I can do with this pen. So I don't necessarily go over exactly the same path that I've just been, but I can be slightly to one side, or I can cross over slightly. Now, one of the dangers with this pen is I want to use it like a pen, which basically means I'm expecting it to react fast, but of course it doesn't. Temperature is turned down quite a bit, so I actually have to move it quite slowly to create anything more than a superficial colour. Interestingly, this almost seems as though it's creating finer lines. Now, I don't know if that's because of the markings that I've already put there from the other tools, or whether it really is creating them, or it's just an optical illusion that's being created because I am overlapping. Okay. It seems to be sort of working a little bit along the lines of what I'm after, so we're going to carry on with this particular tool. Now you can get pens which are like coils of wire basically. The intent of them is supposed to be for fur, so you can create lots of strands all in one go. I never thought, well, I never looked at that and thought, how's that going to do what it claims to do. But given that this is kind of like one coil and it's sort of producing something which is sort of looking reasonable, then maybe it wasn't such an unreasonable claim after all. I mean, if it didn't actually do what they said it would do, then I suppose they wouldn't be selling it, but I'm a little bit skeptical sometimes. Interesting. Still not showing up fantastically well on camera as a main area. It sort of looks just dark at the moment. Still not sure I'm happy with it, but it does seem to be working a little bit better. Mainly because it's not cutting into the wood. Again, one of the things it happens with pencils as well. If you're doing things like I am doing here, I'm sort of trying not to start in the same. I'm not succeeding very well. Try not to start in the same place, because when you do start in the same place, you effectively create a little blob at the top, and those little blobs line up and you get like a line. And of course that's not something that you actually have in nature very often. I mean, tigers obviously have lines, but I just came down here just to see if I can get see what it looks like when I'm not going over the top of areas that I've sort of done with the other tools. As usual, I come across the limitation of the fact that humans are not very good at random. Exilian, good evening and welcome to the studio this evening. As you join, I am trying to understand fur and how to get something that actually resembles it, or in this case long fur. And so far I've tried about 3 different techniques. Including at least one that I'd have tried if I was airbrushing, but I know well, effectively the technique that I would use is airbrushing I can't really use. Doesn't work fantastically well in pyrographic terms. Yeah, not too bad. I'm not sure I like that quite so much. Again, maybe it's something I've got to go over, maybe I've got to scratch it, or maybe it'll look better once I put the mane around it. I could be being fooled at the moment just by the shapes, so I'm not at the moment overly concerned about it. Basically, I don't know what I'm doing, and I make it up as I go along. I mean, that's part of the fun of sort of learning for yourself. I guess well, I was about to say, I guess I could actually have a look on YouTube, see if there's anybody that says, you know, this is how it should work. But I've seen most of the pyrography videos on YouTube, and I don't recall seeing anybody do that. It will indeed, Exilian. That will be the key thing, how it actually ends up looking. I mean, how it looks in this intermediate stage, meh, doesn't really matter ultimately. It's how it does look in the end, as you say. And the way you say that, Aldel H, the face of the lion looks really nice. My mind appends, but the rest of it looks horrible. Whether that's what you meant or not, I'm not sure. But my mind automatically does that. It's just the way I pick up on words. Now, one of the things with pyrography is, I mean, as you gather, obviously, I'm applying heat to an area with the tool, and that heat is what's making it go brown. But that heat does take a little bit of time to dissipate. So if I make a second mark in almost the same area, like trying to go alongside it, for example, then I've already got some heat there, so I don't need to apply as much. And that's one of the tricks with using the shaders, is as you're using the tip of the shader, the heel of it is applying just general heat, even though it might not be touching the wood, so that when you go take the tip over that area, it takes less heat to colour it, and of course you're then applying heat, and so on. So you can work your way down the image. This pen is doing the same thing, albeit on a finer line. And so one of the things I'm actually doing is dotting about a little bit, because I don't want the lines to blend together. I want them to be sort of individual lines, and if I do 2 or 3 next to each other, they're tending to blend in because the heat is sort of being shared across them. So I'm just trying to dot around in the hope that what's going to happen is the area will have cooled down and I'll get an actual line on top of what's already there, rather than them merging together. Yeah, I'm just teasing you a little bit, Aldel H. Yes, Exilian, it is. It is the main today. The face essentially is done. I might tweak some areas, but essentially the face is done, pending what happens with the rest of the main and the background. Although the lower jaw hasn't been touched at all. In that respect, but yeah. So I've sort of been just trying different ways of doing it, and this one at the moment seems perhaps to be the most nice looking. Thank you, Exilian. Go away, hair. I do not want to catch a hair on the heating element of this tool. They smell terrible. this sort of seems to be looking better to me than the other techniques, so I'm probably going to continue with this one, but well, not obvious, but I am going to have to sort of spend time at least trying to apply more shading to the hair than I've got there already, and that's going to be quite a challenging thing to do. It is going to end up being somewhat stylized, I think. Certainly probably going to take lots and lots of layers in the same area, like I'm going over this again. Whilst I'm going over it again with the pen in following the same direction, I'm almost certainly not following exactly the same lines as before. And so what will happen, or what I'm hoping will happen in doing this, is I'll get, like, if you can see, well, you can sort of see there's a little streak there. I'm hoping I'm going to get sort of highlights and lowlights like that, accidentally coming together. Just as I just from creating the individual fur lines as I go through. So while I'm trying to avoid sort of horizontal lines by not starting and stopping in the same place, in this particular case I don't mind inline lines that follow the pattern that I'm establishing. So I am hoping just by layering lines on top of lines that I will get that sort of random highlights and lowlights that you get on hair, basically. I'm trying to sort of both Exilian hair. The hair itself is the main is very fine hair, but you're not seeing individual hairs, you're seeing like small clumps of hairs. And I'm trying to get that clump of hair, but then just depending on how the next one is to it, you might have a little shadow between them, or the one behind might be slightly higher than the one in front, so it's lit, and the one in front is also lit, so that the relationship changes. And I'm just trying to do something. I'm not trying to replicate a picture in terms of this strand of hair is lighter than that one. I am just trying to get sort of hair-like, and overall lighting resembles what it should do. So yes, I could, and that might be something I'll actually try, Exilian, certainly in places like the ears and the jaw when I do it. Nachmui, you love safari, that's good. Then you might like a different picture that I've done before, like that one. Okay, Aldo H, have a good evening, and I'll see you later. So there's a safari type picture. Alt HL, Alt LH sort of. Thank you, Nashmarie. Oops, that tip is now dirty. Oh, it's got something on it. A little bit of carbon. Well, interesting. Nashmarie, yes, that's correct. This is wood. It's actually birch plywood, so it's relatively thin, and this is sort of 3 layers. So I don't actually know what the core wood is. It's probably some cheap core wood, but it's what they call AAA grade birch on both sides. It's a well, I use plywood because it's actually dimensionally more stable than wood is. If it was solid, it would tend to warp when I applied this sort of much heat to it. So but yeah, and you can do this on other things as well. You can do it on leather. You can do it on bone, although that smells quite a bit. You can do it on things like gourds. That's often done on gourds when they're dried. And you can actually do it on card and paper. But you know, technically it is possible to do it on paper. And I'm just looking to see if I've got a bit of paper around. The thicker the paper, the better, as in card. But it is possible. To do it on. This is just normal photocopy paper, and I've turned the temperature down on this pen quite a bit. Just as an illustration. This isn't the ideal pen for doing what I'm doing, which is sort of just creating a block of colour, but I'm just putting a little bit of colour on there, so it's sort of so I could do it on here as well. And if I turn this up, I can actually write on it as well. But as I say, obviously paper and card is just sort of a different form of wood, so you might expect basically any natural fibre. You can also do it on like denim and cotton materials. They're just things like paper. I have to turn the heat right down, otherwise it just burns straight through. Whereas wood, it will take more heat than the paper does, and So you have to learn the materials, but yeah, you can do it. Can't easily do it on things like plastic because the plastic just melts. So it tends to be natural fibres more than anything. Yeah, but it's reindeer horn. Yeah, well, a horn is kind of hair as well, so um, bone is a slightly different smell, but reindeer horn is hair, or it's the same sort of idea as hair. So you can probably imagine what it's like when I catch just one or two little tiny ones on here. Mm. And I bet one of the things you did with those knives is you heat the knife up to insert it into the reindeer horn. And Nachmiwi, thank you very much for the follow. That's kind of you. So you'd have had a real just to make sure it beds properly. You'd have had a real strong experience of sort of really hot hair. And thank you very much for that comment, Nachmui. Unfortunately, though, it's my time to finish. I've now been streaming for about 2.25 hours. Yeah, almost exactly 2.25 hours. I started to work 2 or so hours ago. I generally only go for a couple of hours. Surprisingly, although these tools aren't have got really localized heat, it does get warm around here. So I like to have a rest after a couple of hours and go get myself a cool drink. But I will be on it again tomorrow. No, I'm sorry about that. But I've got to sleep sometime as well. What I'm going to do is see if there's anybody watching that hasn't noticed that I have a jewellery shop, because I do the jewellery stuff on stream as well when it's appropriate to do so. So you may from time to time see me making things like this, which is one of the items from the shop. Nimthora, thank you very much for following. This is Christmas candy from the shop, which I've got to put clasps on, but actually I was extending this one into a necklace, I think. But yes, you can see me do things like that on stream. And that's the URL, obviously. I'd recommend you take a look, but of course I would, it's my shop. Pass it on to family and friends. You never know, there might be something really nice there that you'd like for a Christmas present or something like that. Okay, Exilian. Just with things like horn, they used to one of the ways they used to do it was to heat the end of things like files and things, and then force it in. And part of the heat also makes it sort of plastic and soft, so it pushes out of the way. But when it cools, it sort of clamps back around the thing. That's why I assumed you might have done that. Thank you very much. When I'm advertising, I tend not to be very humble, but thanks. And of course, that's a lovely bracelet, is that one? But I would say that a special lady, if you look for it in the shop. What I'm going to do is say, if you're watching and not following, then I encourage you to do so, of course, like the two people that just did, and thank you again to both of you. But if you just like the notification when I go live, then you can follow me on Twitter. It's @ZaragonArt. The details are below the stream window in case you come back later and wonder what it was, or they'll be on the end plate in a moment as well. If you'd just like to catch me tomorrow, which will be the next stream, it's from 8 PM UK time. That's 2000 hours UTC/GMT. All three are the same at the moment. Or about 2 hours 20 minutes ago if you're in another time zone. But tomorrow night, of course. So thank you all. It's been great fun this evening. I hope I'll see you all again in the future. And bye for now.